Liberation or self-realization can be defined as bringing the imposter self to its final end so that you can remain eternally as your true self, which is absolutely perfect, infinite awareness, love, bliss, that has never experienced any sorrow or suffering in all of eternity. The most effective aid to self-realization is awakening the extremely intense desire for liberation. The imposter self is very deceptive. In almost all humans, the imposter self's desire to continue its imaginary existence is much greater than its desire to be brought to a final end. Therefore, the imposter self uses numerous preservation strategies to ensure the continuation of its imaginary existence. The imposter self has millions of potential preservation strategies. There are as many potential preservation strategies as there are possible combinations of thoughts, beliefs, ideas, concepts, and opinions. The imposter self is thoughts and controls thinking. One of the imposter self's preservation strategies is to direct people's attention outward. Historically, the imposter self has almost always been successful. The imposter self has succeeded in enslaving almost all of humans in the past. Not even 1 out of every 100 million humans in the past has attained liberation. This series of 6 books, the Self-Realization series, is for the purpose of conquering all of the obstacles to liberation, one obstacle at a time. The awakening of the extremely intense desire for liberation will put an end to all of the imposter self's preservation strategies. The 2 great keys are, number 1, the awakening of the extremely intense desire for liberation. Number 2, self-honesty. Self-honesty begins by actually seeing the imposter self's preservation strategies, tricks, and deceptions. The Desire for Liberation is Book 2 in the Self-Realization series. One purpose of the Self-Realization series is to put just one category of quotes into a small book that has the advantage of making it easier to focus, meditate on, grasp, and have insight into just one subject at a time. That makes the approach simple, easier, and less complicated. The idea is to stay focused on just one subject until you have received everything you need to receive from that one subject. Most people go on to the next subject without ever having learned to apply to their lives the subject they were studying now. The Self-Realization series of books are portable practice manuals aimed at helping sincere seekers of self-realization master one key to self-realization at a time. Chapter 1. Sages' Quotes about the Desire for Liberation. Sri Annamalai Swami. 786. The desire for enlightenment is necessary because without it, you will never take the necessary steps to realize the self. A desire to walk to a particular place is necessary before you take any steps. If that desire is not present, you will never take the first step. When you realize the self, that desire will go. 787. If the intensity to know yourself is strong enough, the intensity of your yearning will take you to the self. 788. Your most important objective must be realizing the self. If you have not done this, you will spend your time in ignorance and illusion. Sri Sadhu Om. 789. The mind which has obtained a burning desire for self-attention, which is self-inquiry, is said to be the fully mature one. 790. Since this mind, which has very well understood that the consciousness which shines as I alone is the source of full and real happiness, now seeks self because of its natural craving for happiness, this intense desire to attend to self is indeed the highest form of devotion. 791. In order to qualify as an aspirant, one must have the absolute conviction that happiness, the sole aim of all living beings, can be obtained not from external objects, but only from one's own inmost self. When one has this qualification, an intense yearning will arise in one's heart to try to attend to and know self. Indeed, for a true aspirant, the desire and effort to know self will become the most important part of his life, and all other things will be regarded as being of only secondary importance. When such an intense yearning arises in one, success is assured. For where there is a will, there is a way. 792. Mature aspirants will willingly and without rebelling submit themselves to this magnetic power of the grace of self-effulgence. Others, on the other hand, will become extroverted, will turn their attention outwards, fearing the attraction of this power. Therefore, we should first make ourselves fit by the intense love to know the self, and by the tremendous detachment of having no desire to attend to any second or third person. Sri Muruganar, 793. Grace, the supreme, is rare and unique. There is nothing that resembles it. To make it the object of one's desire is the most virtuous of desires, as all other desires are quenched through the very desire for it. It will shine in the heart spontaneously. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, 794. Earnestness is the only condition of success. 795. All will happen as you want it, provided you really want it. 796. Want the best, the highest happiness, the greatest freedom. 797. Your earnestness will determine the rate of progress. 798. It is enough to stop thinking and desiring anything but the Supreme. 799. The idea of enlightenment is of the utmost importance. Just to know there is such a possibility changes one's entire outlook. 800. If you are truly earnest and honest, the attainment of reality will be yours. 801. Whatever name you give it, will or steady purpose or one-pointedness of the mind, you come back to earnestness, sincerity, and honesty. When you are in dead earnest, you bend every incident, every second of your life to your purpose. You do not waste time and energy on other things. You are totally dedicated. Call it will or love or plain honesty. 802. We are complex beings at war within and without. We contradict ourselves all the time, undoing the work of yesterday. No wonder we are stuck. A little of integrity would make a lot of difference. 803. The desire to find the self will be surely fulfilled, provided you want nothing else. But you must be honest with yourself and really want nothing else. If in the meantime you want many other things and are engaged in their pursuit, your main purpose may be delayed until you grow wiser and cease being torn between contradictory urges. Go within, without swerving, without ever looking outward. 804. Merely to trust is not enough. You must also desire. Without desire for freedom, of what use is the confidence that you can acquire freedom? Desire and confidence must go together. The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help. 805. The greatest guru is helpless as long as the disciple is not eager to learn. 806. Eagerness and earnestness are all important. Confidence will come with experience. Be devoted to your goal. 807. If your desire and confidence are strong, they will operate and take you to your goal, for you will not cause delay by hesitation and compromise. 808. The greatest guru is your inner self. Truly, he is the supreme teacher. He alone can take you to your goal, and he alone meets you at the end of the road. Confide in him, and you need no outer guru. But again, you must have the strong desire to find him and do nothing that will create obstacles and delays. And do not waste energy and time on regrets. Learn from your mistakes and do not repeat them. 809. Stop imagining, stop believing. See the contradictions and incongruities, the falsehood and the sorrow of the human state, the need to go beyond. 810. Freedom cannot be gained nor kept without will to freedom. You must strive for liberation. The least you can do is uncover and remove the obstacles diligently. If you want peace, you must strive for it. 811. All you need is a sincere longing for reality. 812. Questioner. How does one reach the supreme state? Maharaj. By renouncing all lesser desires. As long as you are pleased with the lesser, you cannot have the highest. 813. Until you realize the unsatisfactoriness of everything, its transiency and limitation, and collect your energies in one great longing, even the first step is not made. 814. Once you have grasped the truth that the world is full of suffering, that to be born is a calamity, you will find the urge and the energy to go beyond it. 815. There must be the desire first. When the desire is strong, the willingness to try will come. You do not need assurance of success when the desire is strong. 816. Suffering has made you dull, unable to see its enormity. Your first task is to see the sorrow in you and around you. Your next to long intensely for liberation. The very intensity of longing will guide you. You need no other guide. 817. Questioner. How is the person removed? Maharaj. By determination. Understand that it must go and wish it to go. It shall go if you are earnest about it. 818. As long as you are interested in your present way of living, you will not abandon it. Discovery cannot come as long as you cling to the familiar. It is only when you realize fully the immense sorrow of your life and revolt against it that a way out can be found. 819. The real is behind and beyond words, incommunicable, directly experienced, explosive in its effect on the mind. It is easily had when nothing else is wanted. Sri Vasistha. 820. Abandon your latent tendencies, even as a bird wishing to fly into the sky breaks out of its shell. Born of ignorance, these tendencies are hard to destroy, and they give birth to endless sorrow. It is this ignorant, self-limiting tendency of the mind that views the infinite as the finite. However, even as sun dispels mist, inquiry into the nature of the self dispels this ignorant, self-limiting tendency. In fact, the very desire to undertake this inquiry is able to bring about a change. Austerities and such other practices are of no use in this. When the mind is purified of its past, by the arising of wisdom, it abandons its previous tendencies. The mind seeks the self only in order to dissolve itself in the self. This indeed is in the very nature of the mind. This is the supreme goal. Strive for this. 821. Even as darkness disappears on turning towards light, ignorance disappears if you turn towards the light of the self. As long as there does not arise a natural yearning for self-knowledge, so long this ignorance or mental conditioning throws up an endless stream of world appearance. 822. There arises the pure wish to attain liberation. This leads to serious inquiry. Then the mind becomes subtle because the inquiry thins out the mental conditioning. As a result of the rising of pure wisdom, one's consciousness moves in the reality. Then the mental conditioning vanishes and there is a non-attachment. Bondage to action and their fruit ceases. The vision is firmly established in truth, and the apprehension of the unreal is weakened. Even while living and functioning in this world, he who has this unconditioned vision does what has to be done as if he is asleep, without thinking of the world and its pleasures. After some years of living like this, one is fully liberated and he transcends all these states. He is liberated while living. 823. The self being one and undivided, there is nothing else worth attaining or desiring. This self undergoes no change and does not die. 824. In this world all things come into being and perish, and therefore there is repeated experience of sorrow. All the pleasures of the world inevitably end in sorrow. 825. By self-knowledge, rid yourself of the problems connected with the life hereafter. There is no time to lose, for life is ebbing away all the time. 826. When one is knocked about by the troubles and tribulations of earthly existence and is tired of all of this, he seeks refuge from all of this. 827. One should carefully investigate the bliss of liberation and the sorrow inevitable to ignorance. 828. Liberation confers inner coolness, peace on the mind. Bondage promotes psychological distress. Even after realizing this, one does not strive for liberation. How foolish people are! Such people are overcome by desire for sense gratification. But even they can cultivate a desire for liberation by a study of this scripture. Sri Sankara. 829. Internal renunciation and external renunciation. It is the dispassionate man who is capable of these. The dispassionate man abandons fetters, internal and external, because of his yearning for liberation. 830. When the force of the desire for the truth blossoms, selfish desires wither away, just like darkness vanishes before the radiance of the light of dawn. 831. By achieving the purity of a habitual discrimination and dispassion, the mind is inclined to liberation. So the wise seeker after liberation should first develop these. 832. If you really have a desire for liberation, avoid the senses from a great distance, as you would poison, and continually practice the nectar-like qualities of contentment, compassion, forbearance, honesty, calm, and restraint. 833. The wise talk here of 4 qualities, possessed of which one will succeed, but without which one will fail. First is listed discrimination between unchanging and changing realities, and after that, dispassion for the enjoyment of the fruits of action, both here and hereafter, and then the group of 6 qualities, including peace, and of course the desire for liberation. 834. Dispassion is the turning away from what can be seen and heard, and so on everything which is impermanent. 835. The settling of the mind in its goal by turning away from the mass of objects through observing their defects again and again is known as peace. 836. The establishment of the senses, each in its own source, by means of turning away from their objects is known as control. The supreme restraint is in the mind function, not being involved in anything external. 837. Bearing all afflictions without retaliation and without mental disturbance is what is known as patience. 838. It is in a man who has strong dispassion and desire for liberation that peacefulness and so on are really fruitful. 839. Among the contributory factors of liberation, devotion stands supreme, and it is the search for one's own true nature that is meant by devotion. 840. The practice of faith, devotion, and meditation are declared by Scripture to be the means to liberation for a seeker after liberation. He who perseveres in these will achieve freedom from bondage to the body created by ignorance. 841. Let all those who put away and cast aside every sin of thought, who are sated with the world's joys, whose thoughts are full of peace, who delight in words of wisdom, who rule themselves, who long to be free, draw near to this teaching, which is dedicated to them. 842. Renouncing inwardly, renouncing outwardly, this is possible only for him who is free from passion. And he who is free from passion renounces all attachment, within and without, through the longing for freedom. 843. 4 perfections are numbered by the wise. When they are present, there is success, but in their absence is failure. First is counted the discernment between things lasting and unlasting. Next, dispassion, the indifference to self-indulgence. Then the 6 graces, beginning with restfulness, then the longing for freedom. 844. A certainty like this: the eternal is real, the fleeting world is unreal. This is that discernment between things lasting and unlasting. 845. And this is dispassion, a perpetual willingness to give up all sensual self-indulgence, everything lower than the eternal, through a constant sense of their insufficiency. 846. Then the 6 graces, a steady intentness of the mind on its goal. This is restfulness. 847. The steadying of the powers that act and perceive, each in its own sphere, turning them back from sensuality. This is self-control. 848. The raising of the mind above external things. This is the true withdrawal. 849. The enduring of all ills without petulance and without self-pity. This is right endurance. 850. The intentness of the soul on the pure eternal. This is the right meditation. 851. When dispassion and longing for freedom are strong, the restfulness and other graces will bear fruit. 852. But when these 2, dispassion and longing for freedom, are lacking, the restfulness and other graces are a mere appearance. Chapter 2. The desire for liberation. Number 1. Awakening the extremely intense desire for liberation is the most important first step that can be taken towards being liberated now in this lifetime. Number 2. The extremely intense desire for liberation is 3 to 7. Number 3. The extremely intense desire for the direct experience of the absolute truth. Number 4. The extremely intense longing for the ending of sorrow and the experience of eternal love joy. Number 5. The extremely intense desire to experience who or what you really are at your core and to live eternally as your true self. Number 6. The extremely intense desire for freedom from all illusion and delusion, and freedom from the ego, which is the source of all illusion and delusion. And number 7. The extremely intense desire to awaken from the human nightmare. Number 8. The extremely intense desire for liberation is the foundation of all true spirituality. Number 9. Of all the factors that determine if you will or will not be free, the intensity or lack of intensity of your desire for liberation is the most essential factor. Number 10. Whatever you can do to most effectively increase your desire for liberation should be done. Number 11. Spiritual teachings are not all equal. Number 12. Some teachings are essential, powerful keys. 13. The knowledge that increasing your desire for liberation is the most effective first step you can take is an essential, powerful key. 14. All obstacles that appear in your journey to freedom are caused by too little desire for freedom. 15. Even a little increase in your desire for freedom is helpful. 16. As your desire for freedom grows in intensity, the ego creates fewer obstacles. 17. When your desire for freedom becomes very intense, your desire for freedom demands that you take no detours. 18. When your desire for freedom becomes extremely intense, for the first time you can see what is essential for freedom and what is not essential. 19. When your desire for freedom is weak, the ego does not allow you to see its preservation strategies. 20. When the desire for freedom is stronger, you can begin to see the ego's preservation strategies. 21. When the desire for freedom becomes even stronger, the desire for freedom itself will bring you everything you need to succeed in your quest for liberation, including the answer to all your questions, the direct path teachings, the solution to all obstacles, the motivation to practice, etc. 22. You will be able to see how, before the awakening of the extremely intense desire for liberation, the ego selected spiritual teachings that would help to preserve the ego. 23. When the desire for freedom becomes even more intense, you can see all the ego's preservation strategies. 24. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will marvel at how it was possible you did not see the ego's preservation strategies before. 25. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will be able to see how the ego distorted even the direct path teachings. 26. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will be able to see that almost every spiritual teaching from the past has been distorted by the ego, and that almost all spiritual teachings are created by the ego for the purpose of preserving the ego. 27. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will be able to see that almost all of the spiritual and religious teachings of the past are distractions and detours that serve the ego. 28. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will be surprised at how little the ego let you see before. 29. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, you will see the endless maze of concepts the ego created to trap your attention. 30. When the desire for freedom becomes even more intense, the ego will no longer create ego preservation strategies. 31. The extremely intense desire for the direct experience of the absolute truth will guide you to your inner teacher. 32. The extremely intense desire for truth will guide you to the practice that gives the direct experience of eternal life. 33. The key is the intensity of the desire for the direct experience of the absolute truth. 34. Increasing your desire for the truth is the most important first step. 35. Increasing your desire for freedom is essential. 36. Without an increase in your desire for freedom, all of your attempts at awakening will fail to produce the eternal experience. 37. Without an increase in your desire for freedom, the ego will distort all of your spiritual studies including what you read in this book. 38. Without an increase in your desire for freedom, the ego will never allow you to see the truth. 39. Another great key is self-honesty. 40. Self-honesty will help in all aspects of the quest for liberation. 41. Self-honesty will help you increase your desire for liberation. 42. Self-honesty is being as honest as you can be. 43. Self-honesty means to be 100% honest with yourself at all times. 44. Catch your ego using ego preservation strategies. 45. See your ego creating arguments that lead you away from the direct path. 46. What if your desire for liberation were to double from its present level? 47. If your desire for liberation were to double from its present level, that would be a huge help. 48. If your desire for liberation were to double from its present level, immediately you would begin to see what you have never been able to see before. What if your desire for liberation was more intense than the energy of 1,000,000,000,000 stars? 50. Even if your desire for liberation only doubles or triples, great challenges will occur in what the ego allows you to see. 51. When your desire for liberation increases greatly, every moment of your life will be dedicated to your liberation. 52. That great intense desire for liberation will demand that you do not waste even one moment of time, that you stop the ego lies, and that you drop that which is not essential. 53. The wonderful thing is, that same extreme desire for liberation that brings you the knowledge of what is essential and what is not essential also allows you to see for the first time in your life. 54. Before the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, you think you can see, but really you are blind. 55. After the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, all is made clear and you have no doubts. 56. After the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, for the first time you can see. 57. If the extremely intense desire for liberation does not arise in you. 58. The words in this book will be of little or no real benefit to you. 59. The ego will interpret what is written here in the book you are now reading. 60. The ego will create arguments against what is written here. 61. Instead of seeing what you read literally, without any interpretation, the ego will begin to interpret. 62. The ego will change the teachings into something that preserves the ego instead of something that brings the ego to its final end. 63. Therefore, the most essential key is to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation and to make that desire for freedom grow every day. 64. One of the most powerful tools or keys you can have is to change the way you read. 65. Read extremely slowly, reflecting on a single phrase or a single sentence. 66. Make sure you see the meaning of the sentence before proceeding to the next sentence. 67. When reading, pause, stop, and look. 68. Read the same verse 3 times before proceeding to the next verse. 69. If the desire for liberation is not great enough in you, the ego will always find a way to occupy your time with something other than spiritual practice. 70. Thus, the key to bringing the ego to an end is the intensity of the desire for freedom. 71. Imagine someone being held underwater. How eager is he to rise to the surface to breathe air? 72. Your desire for liberation must be as intense as that man's desire for air. 73. Freedom must be as high on your list of priorities as air is on that man's list of priorities. 74. How great and how intense is the desire for air for someone being held underwater? 75. He would like to rise to the surface, but he is being held underwater. 76. See how intense his desire is to rise to the surface so he can breathe air. 77. Every second his desire to rise to the surface becomes more and more intense. 78. After 1 minute underwater, his desire to breathe is much more intense. 79. After 2 minutes underwater, his desire to rise to the surface for oxygen is 10 times greater. Number 80. After 3 minutes underwater, his desire to rise to the surface is 100 times greater. 81. After 4 minutes underwater, his desire to rise to the surface is 1,000 times greater. 82. How great and how intense is his desire? 83. That is how great and how intense your desire for liberation must become if you are going to succeed in your quest for eternal freedom. 84. If the extremely intense desire for freedom is not present, you can always find a way to avoid spiritual practice. 85. If the extremely intense desire for freedom is not present, there is almost no limit to the ego's capacity to distort. 86. Suppose there was a book written by an awakened sage that was 1,000 pages long, and the only words that were written were the following identical words repeated on every page. And this will be, the words identified here will be from 87 to 93. 87. The only effective means to an end, the ego illusion. 88. Turn your attention away from thought, the body, the world, people, places, things, experiences, etc., and turn your attention towards awareness, watching awareness. 89. If through other means you attempt to bring the ego to an end, the ego may appear to have ended. However, eventually the ego will reappear. 90. Therefore, there are no other effective means to end the ego, to end all suffering and all sorrow, and to live eternally as infinite awareness, love, bliss. 91. Start by setting aside at least 2 hours per day with no other activities for your practice of awareness, watching awareness. 92. If by dropping unnecessary activities you can create more than 2 hours for practice, do so. 93. Set aside as many hours per day as you can spare to practice awareness, watching awareness, with no other activities occurring during your practice time. 94. Even if the above verses 87 through 93 were written on every page, most people would not put into practice the instructions given in those verses. 95. Most people would not put the instructions into practice because their desire for liberation is not strong enough. 96. The desire to preserve the ego is much greater than the desire to end the ego. This is true for almost all humans and almost all spiritual aspirants. 97. The ego has trillions of tricks to preserve its imaginary self. 98. To the previously quoted passages, 87 to 93, the aspirant might say, 99. He does not really mean the only effective means. 100. He does not really mean we need to set aside time with no other activities. 101. He does not really mean we need to practice. 102. The book is actually written in code. Number 3. There are deeper hidden subtle meanings that are more important. 104. This type of confused distortion is very common in humans. 105. The word confused describes, well, almost all humans. 106. They may not use those exact words to distort and complicate. 107. They will find their own words to distort and complicate. Verses 99 to 103 are examples of how people can distort the teachings. The truth is, he really does mean the only effective means, and that time must be set aside for practice with no other activities, and that you need to practice. He really wrote in plain words without a code, and he really wanted you to take the words literally without searching for hidden meanings. 108. The only cure for all of this is the awakening of the extremely intense desire for freedom. 109. What if your present desire for freedom were to become 1,000,000 times more intense than it is now? 110. Then there would not be time for all these games, detours, distractions, delays, and distortions. 111. Then you would stop listening to teachers who are supposedly liberated, but who are not liberated. 112. Then you would not pretend that thinking about spirituality is authentic spirituality. 113. Then you would not pretend that an intellectual journey is a spiritual journey. 114. Then the only means you would accept is the most direct means. 115. Then you would be just like the man who is being held underwater, trying to rise up for air. 116. He does not have time for discussion. 117. He does not have time for games. 118. He does not have time for false teachers. 119. He does not have time for indirect methods. 120. He does not have time for endless reading. 121. He does not have time for television. 122. He does not have time for projecting an imagined meaning onto the teachings. 123. He does not have time for entertainment. 124. He does not have time for pretending to want to be free. 125. He does not have time for dishonesty with himself. 126. He does not have time for pretending he has risen to the surface. 127. He does not have time for debate or argument. 128. The only thing he has time for is to focus all of his attention on rising to the surface. 129. That is why the most important key is the intensity of the desire for freedom. 130. The only problem an aspirant ever has is a desire for liberation that is too weak. An extremely intense desire for liberation will solve all of the other problems. Chapter 3. How to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation. The easiest way to awaken your desire for liberation, number 1, reading this book. The desire for liberation, cover to cover, repeatedly, can help greatly to increase your desire for liberation. Number 2, every time your desire for liberation is weakening, pick up this book and read it cover to cover, beginning with the sage's quotes in chapter 1. Number 3, the way you know that your desire for liberation is weakening is when you are engaged in unnecessary activities. Number 4, the time wasted in unnecessary activities could have been used to do your spiritual practice. Number 5, there are negative and positive ways to increase your desire for liberation. Number 6, a positive and easy way to increase your desire for liberation is to read quotes that were selected specifically for that purpose. Number 7, the quotes found in chapter step 5 from the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening, were selected specifically for the purpose of helping you to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation and to encourage and motivate you to practice. Number 8, The book 4 in the Self-Realization series, Inspiration and Encouragement on the Path to Self-Realization, has the same quotes as the quotes in chapter Step 5 from the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening. Number 9. When you notice your desire for liberation is weakening, read all of those Step 5 quotes every day until you get back on track. Drop the unnecessary activities and use the time thus created for your spiritual practice. Number 10. If that is not enough to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation in you, read one chapter every day, beginning with chapter Step 1 from the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening, until you get back on track. 11. If one reading of the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening, is not enough to get you back on track, then after you finish the book, begin again and read the book cover to cover again. Number 12. If that still is not enough, then read the book a third time cover to cover if necessary, or 100 times cover to cover if necessary. The above listed 12 steps is the easiest and most positive way to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation. The book, The 7 Steps to Awakening, is a collection of 1,574 quotes by Sri Ramana Maharishi, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, Sri Annamalai Swami, Sri Sadhu Om, Sri Muruganar, Sri Vasistha, Sri Sankara. The quotes are organized into the following categories. Step 1. Use the quotes as practice instructions. Know that a conceptual journey is not a journey to awakening. Step 2. Know that the world is a dreamlike illusion. Step 3. See how the imposter self perpetuates its imaginary self and all illusion and suffering. Step 4. Increase your desire for liberation. Step 5. Be inspired, encouraged, and motivated. Step 6. Turn your attention inward. Step 7. Practice the most rapid, effective, and direct method that brings the imposter self to its final end. Awakening the extremely intense desire for liberation. Number 1. One of the primary means to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation is to carefully examine the two choices every day until the extremely intense desire for freedom awakens. 2. Choice A is to choose to end the ego by dropping all unnecessary activities, to create the maximum amount of time every day to practice the most direct and rapid means to eternal bliss. 3. The most direct and rapid means to eternal bliss is the awareness watching awareness method. 4. Choice A is infinite eternal awareness love bliss with no sorrow and no suffering. 5. Choice A is eternal life. 6. Choice A is to live as your true self forever. 7. Choice A is absolutely perfect joy. 8. The above 2 to 7 is a summary of Choice A. 9. To better contemplate Choice A, read descriptions of liberation, such as those found in the chapter Step 5 quotes from the book, The 7 Steps to Awakening. 10. Choice B is being identified with a body subject to suffering, disease, death, violence, anger, fear, etc. 11. Choice B is to allow an imposter called the ego to pretend to be yourself and to control you. 12. Choice B is to allow an imposter ego that has created all the wars, diseases, death, suffering, and evil that every human has ever experienced to continue. 13. Choice B is to have a temporary and therefore futile life that leads only to death. That 10 to 13 is a summary of Choice B. 14. In order to better examine Choice B, you can make a list of all the forms that human suffering takes. 15. You can write on that list thousands of wars, thousands of diseases, thousands of forms of violence, all of the ways that humans deceive, hurt, and cheat each other, and every other form of human suffering that you can think of. Usually humans look at only a small part of the ocean of human suffering. The purpose of the list is to look at the entire ocean of human suffering and the entire negative side of human life in a single glance. The purpose of the list is to see the consequences of choosing B. 16. You need only read the suffering list once. 17. After that reading, the summaries of choices A and B, 1 to 13 above, beginning on page 65 every day, and following the easiest way to awaken the desire for liberation. It should be enough. 18. Read 1 to 13 above, beginning on page 65 every day, comparing the summary of choice A and the summary of choice B, until the extremely intense desire for liberation awakens in you. 19. If you notice the desire for liberation has weakened, repeat the steps described in 17 above until you get back on track again. 20. An aid to awakening the extremely intense desire for liberation is to see the value of the eternal and the futility of the temporary. The ego leads humans throughout their lives from one temporary trivial pursuit to another temporary trivial pursuit. To see the pointlessness of the temporary and the great value of the eternal can be a great help. If you look into the future to see where all these trivial pursuits and useless activities will lead in the end, that also can be a great aid in revealing the pointlessness of the temporary. Ask of every activity you are engaged in or about to engage in, is this contributing to my awakening or distracting from my awakening? Is this leading to the temporary or to the eternal? Is this a necessary activity or an unnecessary activity? 21. Often remembering that the body can end at any moment can also help to awaken the extremely intense desire for freedom. Living every day as though it is your last, using each precious moment to prepare for the eternal, can also be a great help. Imagine there are two businesses you can invest in. You can see that a wrecking ball is about to destroy the first business. You can see that the second business will last forever. The obvious wise choice is to invest in the business that will last forever. 22. How will you know you have made choice A? When you drop all unnecessary activities every day and use all of that free time to practice every day, the most direct and rapid means to eternal bliss. 23. How will you know the extremely intense desire for liberation has been awakened? When you drop all unnecessary activities every day and use all of the free time thus created to actually practice every day, the most direct and rapid means to eternal bliss, you will know the extremely intense desire for freedom has been awakened. 24. The awakening of the extremely intense desire for liberation, which can also be called really making choice A, is 25. It is like a sign 1,000,000,000 miles high stating no more. 26. No more to all of the human evils of the past. 27. No more to all of the horrors of the ego has created. 28. It is like a silent shout saying no more so loudly that if it were given a voice, it would shatter the eardrums of every human on earth. 29. It is a demand for truth. 30. It is the absolute demand for absolute truth. 31. It is the absolute demand for the final end of all human opinions. 32. It is the absolute demand for absolute goodness. 33. It is the absolute demand for the final end of the imposter who is called ego. 34. It is the absolute demand for the direct experience of the true self. 35. It is like an infinitely strong grip that grabs hold of truth with a power so strong nothing can weaken it. 36. It is like an infinitely strong grip that grabs hold of the true self. With such strength, nothing is powerful enough to weaken that grip. 37. The extremely intense desire for liberation is like an infinitely strong grip that grabs hold of the absolute goodness that has never known falsehood with a hold so strong that nothing can weaken that grip. 38. It is like an absolutely immovable no, saying no to the trillions of human lies spoken in the past, and the billions of human lies being thought of each day. 39. It is like an absolute no to the trillions of horrors humans have created in the past, and the billions of horrors humans are creating every day. 40. It is an absolute demand for the end of all sorrow and suffering. 41. It is an absolute demand for perfect, infinite, eternal love, joy. 42. It is an absolute demand that the source of all suffering, violence, and evil, which is the imposter called ego, comes to a final end. 43. It is an absolute devotion to the true self that is the background of awareness. 44. That absolute devotion is turning the attention away from the world, the body, thought, etc., and towards awareness, watching awareness. 45. The extremely intense desire for liberation is a demand for truth that never compromises. 46. It is a demand for the end of thought. 47. It is a demand for the direct experience of absolute truth. 48. When the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, these demands are directed inwards, not towards others. 49. When the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, one never again bows before any egotistical human. 50. When the extremely intense desire for freedom arises, all obstacles are swept away. 51. The extremely intense desire for freedom is absolute dedication and devotion to the absolute truth. 52. It is absolute dedication and devotion to knowing the true self in direct experience. 53. After the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, every moment of one's life is dedicated to awakening from the human dream. 54. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, all of the ego's lies, tricks, deceptions, and games are seen for what they are, and all of the ego's lies, tricks, deceptions, and games eventually end. 55. When the extremely intense desire for liberation is awakened, the nightmare the ego has created is no longer tolerated. 56. The ego is the source of all evil. 57. The ego is lost in a maze of chaotic confusion. This is true for all humans. 58. The human ego has produced trillions of horrors because the ego is not sincere and the ego is lost in delusion. 59. Something in you longs for an end to the imposter's dream. 60. Something in you longs for infinite love. 61. Something in you longs for the end of all suffering and sorrow. 62. Something in you longs for eternal joy, love. 63. It is possible to end the ego's dream and to discover the true self, which is absolutely perfect, infinite, eternal awareness, love, bliss, that has never experienced any suffering or sorrow in all of eternity. 64. It is possible in this lifetime while this body is living. 65. Cooperate with your heart. 66. Stop listening to your ego. 67. If you turn your attention away from thought and towards awareness, watching awareness, and sustain that, look for many hours every day, eventually the ego dream will end and the true self will be experienced. 68. Then all suffering ends, and what remains is the eternal perfection of awareness, love, bliss. 69. Make choice A. 70. Make your choice absolute and absolutely immovable. 71. Make your choice absolutely solid and final. 72. Your true self, the background of awareness, deserves your attention. 73. For your entire life, you have been ignoring your true self. 74. Your true self, the background of awareness, deserves your love. 75. Demand awakening. 76. The human dream is an illusion. 77. Demand the direct experience of eternal life by waking up from the human dream into the reality of your own awareness. 78. Make choice A by dropping all unnecessary activities to create more time for spiritual practice. 79. Make choice A by dropping all distractions, detours, and entertainment to create more time every day for spiritual practice. 80. Make choice A by making sure your practice is the most direct and rapid means to eternal bliss. 81. The suffering that life brings is also a means to awaken the extremely intense desire for liberation. However, it is not an efficient means. People can go through 100 million imaginary lifetimes filled with intense suffering without the extremely intense desire for liberation being awakened. 82. Comparing choice A with choice B and following the 12 steps is a much easier and more rapid means to awaken the extremely intense desire for freedom. 83. Some people will have an insight that permanently awakens the extremely intense desire for freedom. 84. However, for most people, the awakening of the extremely intense desire for freedom is a daily battle, with the intensity of the desire for freedom fluctuating. 85. Reading the comparison of choice A and choice B every day and following the 12 steps can help you win that battle.